How we shape the light in our images determines what we want to communicate visually. Where the light goes, what it lights, and how it lights are all factors that affect the way an audience feels when they view a shot or scene. To recognize how to convey feelings and emotions through our lighting, we need to understand how best to use lighting modifiers. A softbox or an octabox are lighting modifiers. They work by bouncing and reflecting the smaller light source inside the box, then diffusing it through 1 or 2 layers of material. This essentially increases the size of a fixture, softening the quality of light. How soft the light is depends on the size of the softbox, but also how large this softbox appears in relation to a subject or area. The closer the softbox is to a subject, the softer it will be, as it's larger in comparison. The further it is from a subject, the harder it will be, as it's smaller in comparison. Softboxes come in different shapes and sizes, which can affect things like catch lights in the eyes, or in the case of a lantern softbox, affect the spread of light in an overhead area, which can be controlled from a very wide spread into a narrower pool of light using a skirt. Those softboxes, or soft light modifiers, can be varied and invaluable. Here, we've used a Pavobulb 10C inside a lampshade, set to 4700 Kelvin, but warmed up by the lampshade itself. This gives us the start of a warm nighttime interior scenario that we'd like to light for. And say we want the light on our subject to be soft, to give a cozier feeling. We could take a lighting fixture like the FS300C, attached to a 47-inch octabox, and use this to light our scene. Set to 3600 Kelvin to better match the light coming through the warm lampshade, we've placed our light in a position to create some depth and dimension on the face, whilst loosely suggesting the lamp may be the source of this light. But it doesn't feel too much like a cozy home feeling. Our light may be large and soft, but it falls off quickly into darkness due to the angle we've placed it. And since soft light also tends to spill around the area it's lighting, we're losing some control over where we're directing it. We may want to gain back some control over our light. A grid is something we can use on softboxes and other soft sources to better control our light into a tighter angle. Our grid is a bit old and beat up, but does the job in controlling the octabox's spill, allowing us to primarily focus this large source onto our subject. Now we can tackle the shadows separately. Maybe by adding another larger softbox, we could fill in these shadows and get the somewhat cozier feeling we've envisioned. The problem is, we don't really have the space. It's going to be pretty difficult placing an even bigger softbox in this particular room. Luckily, soft light is determined by the size of the light source, not necessarily what that light source is made out of, so we may not need a softbox specifically. We set up a boom arm and clipped a length of bleached muslin material to it, and since we're struggling with space, set up a Pavoslim 120C panel light right next to it, with its attached softbox. But why are we bouncing a soft box into a soft bounce? Since a soft light spills in all directions, we're simply utilising it to spread as much light as possible across our material in a cramped space. In this particular situation, we're creating a graduated wrap of light from the gridded octabox and across the material we've hung up. Some of this is spilling into the room too, which may contribute to some warmer shadows, but in this scenario, that fits okay, since we can see the colour of the walls in shot, and understand why that may be. We now have that cozier feeling we wanted, through careful control, and considered lack of control, using both softbox and material, creating a softer feeling scene, whilst maintaining light direction. We could even add another Pavobulb in this cabinet, if we want to subtly convey this better lit scenario further. But that's only one thing we can do with softboxes here. That 47-inch octabox doesn't have to be our key. Remove the bounce, remove the grid, and move the octabox around into our previous wrap position. Set up an FC120C in a smaller 60cm rapid softbox, gridded for control. And this gives us a different look, geared toward a different mood, which still utilises soft light. One cozier and more well lit, the other moodier and darker feeling, still wrapping our light but not so far around the face, allowing the rest to fall to shadow. Softboxes can be very versatile modifiers, and supplementing them with materials to bounce light from adds to the flexibility of soft light. We can also use materials like this in a more secure way using tools like flags and frames. Here, for example, we've used a 6x6 frame of bleached muslin, bouncing light from a Nanlux 1200B in through the window. And there's another modifier. A reflector dish attaches to a single source lighting fixture, with the reflective silver surface helping to control the light into a particular beam angle, focusing the light and allowing us to better use its output. Some lights have a selection of reflector dishes to choose from, like our Nanlux 1200B here, with its compatible 60-degree reflector dish. The 60-degree spread allowing us to make better use of the light's output, whilst having a wide enough angle of light to fill the majority of our frame, extending the overcast daylight from outdoors, and allowing us to maintain a consistent exposure in the room, regardless of any small ambient changes outside. In this shot, our subject in the greenhouse is backlit by the setting sun. But this sunlight is actually the 1200B again, as far from the greenhouse as we could get it, this time with a narrower 26-degree reflector dish, the smaller angle utilising more of the 1200B's output, the distance allowing us to light as much of the greenhouse as possible, filling the area we're framing on camera. By placing the light out of focus in the background and combining it with the already existing ambient skylight, we're able to use our light and reflector dish in such a way to pretend the real sun was setting in the background. So reflector dishes can be a quick and easy way to focus light and make use of a light's output, whether that's direct or for bouncing into larger sources, and most lighting fixtures will come packaged with one as standard. But we can take focusing and concentrating light a step further with a Fresnel lens. The Fresnel uses concentric grooves, which help to bend light into a focused point, and they can usually be adjusted from a wider or flooded beam to a narrower or spotted beam. In a previous episode, we took a look at the way a spotted Fresnel lens can help us to cheat the inverse square law, virtually placing our light somewhere behind the actual source and throwing a concentrated beam of light across a distance. This can be helpful when we want to replicate the distance sunlight travels to reach us, with even light fall off and parallel shadows. So while we could use, for example, a Forza 720B, placed high and a good distance from this window, a bare bulb might not be the most efficient way to push sunlight through it. It's not quite competing with the ambient skylight as much as we'd like it to. However, if we attach something like this FL20G Fresnel lens, spotted into the narrowest beam angle to ensure maximum emulated distance, we make much better use of our light's output and reach. Being able to control our sunlight into a specific spot means we don't waste as much output, like with the bare bulb, and as a bonus, we don't have to blind our neighbours. But a Fresnel lens can also have other uses. It produces a more even, softer-edged beam, and since we can spot or flood the beam, we have more flexibility in comparison to the reflector dish. Provided we have the space, we could use a Fresnel to roughly fill a bounce frame or other material. This can provide a much more even coverage as opposed to our graduated coverage from earlier. And since we're concentrating our light into more of a beam, it could even mean firing a beam of light across or above the shot into a bounce on the other side, with no spill from our fixture into the scene. This enables us to use larger, even, softer light in places we may not be able to fit a light fixture and diffusion itself. Maybe we want some fill light in the background of a shot, but not on our subject. A Fresnel can fire a beam of light and be controlled with barn doors into a particular spot on the ceiling, only filling our background. Or we could use a Fresnel through a frame of diffusion or material, like we've done in this situation. A single reflector dish might be a bit more finicky when finding the right position to fill the diffusion, and can leave us with uneven light coverage and a brighter hotspot. Whereas a Fresnel gives us the flexibility to choose an appropriate beam angle, and barn door cut to shape the light further, giving us a much more even coverage and softer light. But a Fresnel or reflector dish could both work for something like a book light. We may want a large soft source, but find we don't have enough space to bounce a light from it without the light spilling into our shot, or even showing up on camera. Our only option may be to diffuse the light, but if we barely have any space behind our material either, we won't have a good coverage regardless of which modifier we use. It's nowhere near as soft as we'd like it to be. But if we set up another length of material behind our diffusion, place our light into this little material den we've created and angle it in, using our reflector dish, we can bounce our light from this second piece of material, creating a larger source of light to more evenly fill the bigger diffusion. This is named the book light due to its open book shape, and it can be used in many different configurations depending on the lighting scenario. We've taken a lack of space and an uneven, barely utilised diffusion to an evenly covered, efficiently used large light source, achieving the look we wanted, our large soft source built around a simple reflector dish. So deciding between a reflector dish or Fresnel, whether that's for hard light or to bounce and diffuse for soft light, could be down to budget, efficiency, flexibility, or intent. But these two tools still won't see us through every situation. Before we look at another modifier, how we can use mirrors and build a scene based on what we've learned. Hi, it's me, Rob, the person, not the teacher. Thank you so much for everyone's support over the years, whether you're a YouTube viewer or a YouTube member or you're over on Patreon. I hope my videos can continue being useful into the future. If you are enjoying the videos and you want to get some more out of them, we do have the Patreon, which has extended videos for all of the A to Z series and other YouTube videos. We have extra videos on there, maybe looking at cameras, maybe looking at color grading, and just little updates every now and again. And we also have the Discord. We also have YouTube memberships, which are extended videos of all the YouTube videos that you find on here. Cheers again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Let's say we're shooting in a tiny space on the second floor of a house, and we want soft daylight coming from the window behind our subject. This is a very small room, with no real space for lights, and we could just use natural light, but that may change in both brightness and temperature as we shoot. So we'd like to implement our own lighting to keep things consistent, but unlike earlier with our bounce light through the window, it wouldn't be as safe to secure a large frame so high up. We definitely don't have the budget to do something like this. But what we could do is put some material in the window. In this case, we taped a length of bleached muslin roughly to our blinds. Now a simple bare bulb, Forza 60C, will hit our material, but it's also going to spill all around the rest of the location too. So we could use a Fresnel, spotted in, to fire a controlled beam above our shot and into the material. But there's a problem here. Even spotted in to a 10-degree beam, we're not quite inside the confines of our window. We could use barn doors to control this, but since the Fresnel has a softer edged beam, we end up blocking the majority of our output, simply trying to shape the light into the window. We're willing to accept the light being cut off here, since we can't get it past the door, but we can't shoot the scene without enough light. This is where we might want to use a different modifier, the spot or projection mount. This modifier projects the light from a lighting fixture into a harder edged beam, which means it can be shaped much more precisely than a Fresnel, using the attached cutters. We can also defocus the beam while still retaining a lot of control over the edges, and even use gobos, stenciled metal discs, that allow us to project images and patterns. The obvious use for the projection mount is in a scenario like this, using a gobo to emulate the pattern of blinds on the back wall, shaped into an angle to represent light coming from a different direction. So we can think of the Fresnel as more of a brute force beam of light, we blast it at a location and shape it externally, using the environment. While a projection mount is much more precise and better suited to being shaped internally, using the modifier itself. Here, this practical light bulb isn't quite lighting our subject and scene as much as we'd like, so we could simply place some foam board in this gap off camera near the bulb, and use the Forza 60C FMM projection mount attached to cut the light precisely onto the bounce. Compared to our difficulties with the Fresnel before, this is much more accurate, even into a smaller area. Now our foam board becomes the source of light, motivated by the bulb. So while both the projection mount and the Fresnel can be used for similar things, depending on the situation, one may work better than the other. In our small room, for example, we're not getting what we need from the Fresnel, so we'll swap it out for the PJ FMM projection mount, using the 36-degree barrel. Now we're able to shape the light with our cutters much more precisely, filling the majority of our window material evenly. Instead of a bare, uncontrolled light source spilling all around the room, our projection mount has helped the material in the window become the light source. Negative fill is going to be useful here also, since we've got a lot of lighter elements in the room reflecting light back at our subject, so we'll use some dark material to block some of this, providing some negative fill to the shadow side of our subject. Now that we've got everything under control, what if we want some sunlight? That's where something like a mirror can come in handy. By roughly propping up a mirror in the window, in this case one we can rotate, we can reflect back some of the beam from our projector mount. This gives us a small patch of sunlight we can position onto the bed and our subject. Along with our bounce material, we're effectively creating two light sources, sun and sky, both actually coming from a single source. Mirrors can be extremely useful tools when combined with the projection mount or Fresnel, as light can be directed into them, increasing the virtual distance of your light source even further, whilst utilising the throw of the beam, allowing you to light from areas you might not otherwise be able to. And not just in tight areas either. When we used the 720B and FL20G Fresnel earlier, up high and spotted in, we only had enough room to fill a smaller window. Do this with a mirror instead, with the Fresnel directed into it, and we can fill an even larger area, like these bigger patio doors, even when spotted into a narrow beam angle, since the light is technically further away, and since our light source is now in a place we wouldn't otherwise be able to physically put it, we have a more realistic recreation of sunlight or sunset, beaming through the whole house. So we could shoot this moody scene in the front room, our sun peeking through the back window and backlighting the area. And we could also shoot right by the windows, without changing or moving the light, our recreated sunlight still far away enough for an even coverage of light through the window, using the inverse square law to better represent the distance of the sun. The same goes for the projection mount, the PJ, BM and 19-degree lens on our 720B here, giving us the added benefit of further light shaping and gobos. So on top of distance and external light shaping, we're also able to shape the light internally too. Okay, let's build a scene from scratch, using some of the modifiers we've looked at and the ways we've learned to use them, some more obviously and some more subtly. We want to create this feeling of early morning in the kitchen, whilst retaining some shape and a little mood, visible but not too bright. So first, we'll introduce our sun. An Evoke 600C FL20G Fresnel attached, set to maximum spot. We're quite tight on space here to get the angle of light we need. Spotted in, the Fresnel just about covers the section of window we need illuminated, hitting our subject directly and lighting up the window area, which is also providing some ambient to the room. We don't want it to hit his face, however, since this is a bit too hard and dramatic for the look we're after, and we're actually catching the edge of the light beam on the background since it's not filling the window. But remember, we're using a Fresnel, which is best controlled externally. A simple lowering of the blinds in the window, directs this beam of light into the bottom half of the room, the external environment shaping this punchier beam. Now we've darkened the face, we'd like to bring it back up a little more gently, along with some more of the room, without interfering with the general direction of the existing light. This might call for some softer, but controlled light, and we know one way to control soft light. We set up a Forza 500B2 with a 90 cm rapid softbox attached, gridded to control spill light. This helps to gently illuminate our subject, the grid keeping this soft light controlled onto him and helping to lift this section of darker background, with everything still lining up with the direction of our window light, extending the ambient whilst providing both light and shape on our subject. We want our space to feel a bit brighter overall, so it might be good to bring some more highlights and fill light into the frame. Since our Fresnel is spotted in so close to the window, we can't redirect it without losing the light we currently have on our subject. But we know a tool we can use inside the room and still convey the direction of our sunlight. This is a job for our projection mount, in this case the PJ-FMM, using a Forza 60C. In this situation, we didn't utilise the cutters to match up our sunlight's direction in an obvious way, but instead used it as a simple, directed patch of sunlight onto these kitchen utensils in the background. This is the kind of subtle precision we can only achieve with a modifier like the projection attachment at the angle and distance we've used it from. And it still follows the beam of sunlight from our Fresnel in a logical fashion across the lower half of the frame. Finally, we'd like to slightly lower the contrast ratio on the face, whilst bringing up our general ambience a little, so a large, soft, uncontrolled light could be useful here. We'd like to wrap this light around from our softbox, but we're very pushed for space around camera. So let's get a little DIY. We simply hung some bleached muslin material on the fridge, and we don't really have the space to create an even coverage of light across this material using a Fresnel or projection mount. So we set up a Pavoslim 120C with its attached softbox, and bounced it at an angle, using both the material and the other large reflective surfaces in the room. Similar to our earlier setup, this creates a graduated wrap across a larger area, gently raising our shadows around the room. And one final tweak, we added some negative fill with a length of darker material boomed to the right side of our subject, as well as some more material to block the lighter reflections from the floor and kitchen sides. This brings a touch of contrast back to the far side of the face. And that's how we got to our final setup. By learning about modifiers, understanding the different ways in which we can use them, and applying what we've learned to make use of their varying functions, we've been able to create a realistic feeling scene with both hard and soft, controlled and uncontrolled light, all geared toward an intended time of day and feeling. Understanding how light works and the ways we can use it is paramount to conveying both time of day and the intended mood and feeling of an image, and modifiers are a vital tool to help us present these ideas visually. Extended episodes of Lighting for Cinema are released early on Patreon and to YouTube members, with patrons getting extra videos and access to the Discord server.